Good morning and welcome back to the channel. So, we are winding up a little bit on our look into vampires, and I'm going to offer my standard apology that I am sick as a dog, so my voice is not terribly great. But hey, we work with what we've got, right? We work with what we've got. So, as always, remember if you're enjoying this, like, subscribe, do all the fancy things. Hey, David, welcome. So, yeah, we are finishing up our view on vampires, and we have looked at all of the historical stuff. But here's a question for you: what about today? Is there a modern mythology or such? Well, as it turns out, vampires are very popular, and there are, in fact, modern communities who identify with the aesthetic, right up to those who believe they really truly are, and in fact will consume blood in order to um, fuel their needs, I suppose. So, hey, Mr. Wrong, welcome. Um, Looking at what is possible, it does exist around the world, and on the lowest level, we will say that there is an aesthetic subculture, people who are very into gothic literature, vampire movies, RPGs, and various other things connected with vampires, and they tend to the dressing up type more than anything else, wearing gothic clothing or black clothing and prosthetic fangs. But by and large, that's just harmless role play. Coffee for the day, why not? Um, there are those who are what we can, in inverted commas at least, say are real vampires, people who believe they need to either consume blood or energy to maintain their physical, mental, and emotional well being. And this can involve drinking small amounts of actual human blood, which we refer to in the lingo, as it were, as sanguinarians, and those who believe that they only need the energy, psychic vampires, and those who believe they are both. Now, the communities offer a space for individuals to connect and belong. Um, Very often, these are considered as subcultures that are against the particular norms of society. Many of them are very private about their path and don't go for public recognition, but do want recognition in their own groups. And of course, what with the internet, um, there is a huge online presence that connects people up with the whole vampire community. So you've got your three kinds. Now, to begin with, we need to ask, are these people a threat to anybody? And the general consensus by those who've looked into it, is that no, they're not. And any consumption of blood is done within consensual and specific contexts. They are not uh, lurking in the dark in alleyways to accost people. There are quite a lot of different views on how it should be lived and different practices and even esoteric rituals that go along with it. But in essence, modern vampire communities are a diverse and evolving subculture with a shared interest in mythology and aesthetic of vampires, while some might engage in practices that go beyond the aesthetic. Most are looking for a place that is safe where they can express their beliefs and values, which does sound fair enough. Um, a lot of this is from the Wikipedia telling you what is said. Um, by and large, how many cults are there around? Well, again, we're going to have a look at what we can find online. Uh, and if we pull it up, we will find that there is the South African Vampire Alliance, SAVA. It's an independent and autonomous organization for the vampire community in South Africa. So, all right, all right. Um, they have their culture and um, ways to contact them. You can join them, you can be a part of their group, and of course, there is even a Facebook group. So we have a sufficiency of online connections for Sava, um, but there is more than that. I think that is going on. I think it would be fair to say that there is a sufficiency of interest that people want to be a part of it. Um, these, of course, are, as we have looked at in other varieties of vampiric groups, very much a case of being living people. I don't think anybody has turned out to actually be a risen dead, which, well, we certainly hope so. Maybe there are, but absolutely there is a large quantity of interest in the lifestyle in the modern age. Now, Sava, of course, is in South Africa, but from what I have found online, there is a great deal of groups like this all over the world. And so you can join up, become a vampire, um, maybe find other people. They speak of those who are not vampires that are part of their groups that allow for the sanguines to consensually consume. Um, so, yeah, there's quite a big group. Now, related to vampires, of course, and which I think is quite important, is the concept of werewolves. Looking back through history, I think it's more a modern movie thing that connects the two, rather than an actual connection in the cryptid, as it were. But nevertheless, it gives us a way into the next bit, which is, what are werewolves? Are there only werewolves, and where do they come from? Well, that's where things get very, very interesting. Strictly speaking, we refer to werewolves as lycanthropes, and of course, they come from the old Greek legend of the king Lycaon, who, for varying reasons, was cursed by the gods and turned into a shapeshifter of a wolf. Now, wolves generally you only find in Europe, and therefore proper lycanthropes you only find in Europe, which makes sense, I suppose, from a lot of different angles. If it's just a viewpoint of a psychosis or something like that, obviously, if you don't get wolves, you won't believe you can turn into one. Um, and if it's real, maybe it works like anything. You get what animals or cryptids wherever you actually are. Um, the blanket term actually is therianthropy, which refers to the ability to turn into some form of animal. So, in medical documents, clinical lycanthropy or therianthropy is a psychiatric delusion, whereas in mythology, you actually can, if it's true. And of course, you also get in the modern age, just like with vampires, you have Therians and otherkin, people who identify with specific animals or other beasts or beings, not all of which are necessarily um, real animals as we know them. So, people who identify with dragons, etc. So, certainly there is that in the modern age, and quite possibly in the older times as well. As we know, a great many cave paintings and old stories from all over the world will tell you of how there are certainly hunters' dances where people dance and then reenact hunts and um, draw on the spirit, at least, of the animal. We also know the famous Nordic traditions of the Berserk, uh, and there are several varieties of those, actually, historically speaking, including the Ulf Hednar and so on. So, associating with animals absolutely is something that humans have been doing for a very long time. Now, our modern word for lycanthropy may well come from the Greek story of King Lacan, but the idea of shapeshifting has been a part of human experience in pretty much every culture for centuries. And of course, we can further add that it's not simply um, therianthropy in terms of what we would think it to be. There's a lot more than that. We've got very, very ancient rock art from the San in South Africa, where it's shown uh, human and animal hybrids and so on. Throughout Africa, in Lesotho, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, you find all kinds of things exactly like that. So there's no lack. There's definitely no lack. Hey there to the Emperor's son. Good of you to join us. So therianthropy, very much a real thing in the past, very much a real thing in the present. Um, I think it's fair to say that there is a sufficiency of connection to a lot of things. In early culture in the British Isles, it was very much understood that witches, especially, could transform into small animals, very often the hare, and then travel to their secret destinations. Um, we have a whole selection of different um, therianthropes, shall we call it, throughout um, throughout the cultures and so forth in that regard. Um, but what kind do you get if not only wolves? Well, we can start up, if you will, with Um, the obvious ones, which are the wolves, they'd certainly come out of the European cultures, all around the Slavic states and more, and France. There were some very famous stories of the werewolf attacks in France. In Asia, of course, you have the kitsune, which are foxes. Um, in the Greek Isles, um, you have things called Kalekantzaros, which apparently also can change into things. What exactly they are, it seems, is a little bit more varied, but they are goblin like, if nothing else. Um, but shapeshifting absolutely goes across a large collection of um, shape-shifting creatures. Um, so there is absolutely no lack. Of course, in the Americas, you have the Wendigo, which are said to be truly evil people that have somehow become so affected by their evil and cannibalism that they have become something more. So we certainly have those going, and then in the South Pacific, excuse me, islands, you have were sharks, which makes sense. They are all, of course, very much um, a water-based culture for obvious reasons, being on the islands. So it makes sense that they would have shapeshifters that fit to their own kind. Um, there are stories as well of probably, maybe, I don't know, less violent shapeshifters in the form of swan maidens in Europe, ladies that can turn into swans, and of course the famous Selkie from the Scottish Isles. And there is Mr. Leon Burtis. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Join if you want. You are always welcome to join us. We are on to therianthropy for today. Um, absolutely fascinating sort of collection. So we can say that not all therianthropes are dangerous or evil, and it seems that they are more considered to be an alternate species, but that is not always the case. Um, good morning to you, sir. I would say that it is very much a possibility that the more famous cases are very much violent. One of the most famous cases of all is that of Peter Stubbs from Germany, who not only was said to be a werewolf, and specifically a wolf in his case, but he actually claimed he was a wolf and was capable of transforming, and that he attacked the people that he did to get revenge, and it was a deliberate and aimed attack, and he murdered quite a few. Um, and he was eventually caught, and I do believe he was burned at the stake. So, but utterly unrepentant in the doing thereof. So, yeah, definitely a case of weirdness in that regard. So we can say that we have therianthropes all over the world, lots of different kinds. Uh, my particular favorites, of course, come from the Nordic mythology, where you have four varieties, I believe. The most well known are the bearskin uh, fighters known as the Berserk, uh, where we get the modern word berserk from. and they were said to be mindlessly violent once they had worked themselves up in battle, and would be terrifying. Um, but unfortunately, they were also utterly uncontrollable, and they were eventually banned entirely in the Nordic communities. But they were not the only ones. As I mentioned, you also had not only the Bersark, but you also had the Ulfhedna, um, which referred to those who were wolf like, who were much more hunters and far more terrifying. You also had the boar shifters, who were said to be the greatest defenders, um, and were very disciplined, and they usually were guards for um, kings and chiefs. And then there was a final version, which I think is very weird and interesting. I forget the exact word in Icelandic, but they were raven connected, and they were um, sort of assassins and connected to various dark magic, very scary stuff. So, yeah, Berserk, um, Hamask, which means to change form and to enter into this state of wild fury as bears, or as the Ulfhednar or Ulfhethnar. My Icelandic is non-existent, so if I mispronounce, I do apologize, of course. Um, but yeah, so lots of different varieties just in the Nordic. Um, we know that in most cultures, anyone that changes shape is called evil straight away, and it's usually associated with some fairly awful situations. But yeah, the Norse poetry tells us that while the Berserk were not considered good, and certainly the Ulfhedna were a little bit worrying, the Jolfur, the Boar warriors, were highly prized. Um, so definitely considered good. Um, the other ones, yeah, we have to be a bit dubious about, I suppose. Um, those from Scotland, like the Selkies, are considered to be really nice. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not tricksters at all. They're just another group of people that happen to live in the sea, that are half seal. And usually, if in any of these stories that go along with these things, they're the victims from fairly nasty people. Um, so yeah, the kitsune, of course, the fox shifters in Japan are considered tricksters, but not necessarily bad per se. And yeah, we also here we go. We have the falasha. There we go. Tell it. We're gonna have to pull that up a bit because I'm not familiar with the falasha. So let's just check that. Thank you there, Mr. Burtis. We're just going to pull that up and see what we can say from, okay, the Ethiopian Jews, so very much um, an African version, and it refers to a wanderer or an exile of some kind, but we're hyenas. And yes, in Africa, um, we don't get we're wolves at all. We're lions and we're hyenas. Now, not too sure about the lions, but certainly the hyenas are considered to be evil by most groups, though not entirely sure why. Mostly, I think it's because people don't like hyenas per se. but absolutely connected to magic, and of course considered to be very much strange and outsider type people. Um, so a form of therianthropy, not unlike a werewolf, um, comes up in Africa in several different um, tribes, from Somalia or Ethiopia, even right the way down to South Africa, and with various different methods for what caused their change or what allowed them to change. Um, I know that many of the Central African groups call them Buddha, um, and right the way through up, in fact, into Tanzania and Morocco, you've got the same belief. So, where hyenas are definitely a part of African understandings, and of course, we're lions as well. Uh, but then, what lions would be the major viewed upon uh, cultural bad guy, I suppose, or biggest threat in the felt. So it makes sense that you would get were lions in Africa. Um, of course, in India, you have the were snakes, um, which some may or may not be connected to the Naga, um, may be able to appear as people, may be able to appear fully as a snake or as a halfway between. You seem to get different stories there. And what's interesting here is that the were hyenas are often considered to be partially vampiric, making them, unlike many of the other therianthropes, part and part, half a vampire and half a shapeshifter. There's a lot of stories in popular culture that cover these things. Usually they're considered to be very much bad. There's even a couple of movies, and they've turned up in the all-time favorite um, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So, Leon, that's amazing. The Adze Firefly into a story. Yes, absolutely. So we have carryover. So vampire in Africa can be full vampires, like as Leon's talking about the Adze fireflies, or they can be were hyenas, which are sort of half and half. Um, I think in many ways it's a case of where you go, you'll get different animals. Some can only change due to a special skin that they put on and take off. Some use specially prepared sticks that they rub over them. Some use specially prepared ointments. Um, so dependent on where you go, I believe that the Adze were hyena, which is linked to their firefly vampires, uses a special stick. If you are interested in that, Leon. Um, in America, of course, you have the skinwalkers from the Navajo culture, which it is a witch of some kind and then can become varying forms of animal or even other people. So they're a multi collectional thing. In Africa, of course, you had the Leopard Society, um, where they actually had a cult that went very strong between 1890 and 1935, where the members believed themselves they could transform into leopards through witchcraft and certainly society believed that they could, which was very, very interesting. Um, they're generally consider to not approve of normal human beings and are very, very violent against. So they're supposed to be bad for the most part. But as I say, lots of places they seem to not actually be a problem. Um, you have varying weird jaguars in South America, uh, even as far back as the Aztec and Olmec groups. And of course, it may very well be connected to warrior culture, as it is with the Nordic groups. Um, you do in certain places even get weird rats. Um, and this may connect up to the rise of cities and so forth, but in Japan, you certainly get weird rats. So there's no denying that there's a lot of stuff that seems to revolve around far more than we can easily get into. But I think it would be a lot of fun, at least, to check out one or two of the groups. And seeing as we're in Africa at the moment, maybe we should um, have a look at the weird hyenas. Comment there from Leon. Yeah, strange that chameleons don't show up as shapeshifters. Actually, they do. And this is something which came up from a friend of mine from Uganda, of all places. He was from Uganda himself. And one day, because he stayed in the same hostel I did when I was in college, and um, we found a chameleon in the garden. And I love chameleons, so I picked it up and I went over to him and said, "Hey, look at this." And he was terrified. He says, "No, in our culture, chameleons are evil. We don't have anything to do with those. We can possibly avoid it." So I said, "Oh, why is this?" No, they're considered to be witches that can shapeshift. And in Uganda, apparently, they can grow up to 2 feet long, which is a hell of a size for a chameleon. So yeah, in Uganda, you get shapeshifting chameleons. So there you are. There are actually versions thereof. Now, certainly the lion shifters tend to turn up in Central Africa. In South Africa, we seem to only have the were hyena, at least in traditional culture. So why that would be, I'm not. Maybe we got less lions down here. I don't know. Maybe it's because it's very, very much a Bantu thing as well. And of course, Bantus come from Central Africa more than uh, any of the other places. Um, but in Somalia, you become a Kori Ismaris, which literally translates as one who rubs himself with a stick. Um, Literally, by taking a specialized magical stick at nightfall and rubbing it over yourself turns you into a hyena man, and back again in the morning with the use of the same stick. So that was where that came from. Um, Interestingly, in Ethiopia, where hyenas are blacksmiths, and the blacksmith trade is hereditary, and they are in many cultures considered to be a kind of witch. Even in South Africa, you've got the Isangoma and the Inyanga, but less well known, you also have the blacksmith. I don't recall the proper word for it. And they are said to have the power to turn into a were hyena. um, and then very much would go and rob graves. And in Ethiopia, they are indeed called Boda or Buddha, not to be confused with Buddha from Asia. Um, Different sort of thing. Excuse me. In Morocco, a number of the Berber tribes um, believe in the wer hyena. And again, it's mostly at night. The Ethiopian Christians often said that the Ethiopian Jews were Buddhas, bit of religious conflict there, and claimed that they dug up Christian corpses and ate them. Um, and this may have connected to the fact that many Jewish men in Ethiopia were blacksmiths. It was a good trade to have, so that might have connected that. In the area of Chad, they are referred to as Bultungin, which again translates into I change myself into hyena. And there's apparently um, an entire village there that are made up entirely of wer hyenas. So who knows? Maybe that is quite the truth, and we should go and see it. Haha. Are they? I don't know. Do they believe they are? Again, I'm not sure. I'd like to find out. But they're called Ngazda, and the village is Kabul Tiloa. So maybe that's the truth. There is also folklore in the Western Sudan where um, the hyenas are definitely cannibalistic and tends to go after lovers for some reason. And they are usually also, strangely enough, um, powerful healers, as well as being blacksmiths and woodcutters in human form. But if they have a hairy body and red and gleaming eyes and a nasal voice, just like me now that I'm sick, um, that's a sure sign of a wer hyena. Maybe I'm turning into one. In Mali, people can actually become a wer hyena through imitation of the animal and do so deliberately. Um, but again, hyenas are considered to be fairly nasty. Um, Persia has got some connection to wer hyenas. Um, Greece might have, but it might be more that they are wolves. It's not entirely clear, but there is a version that are vampiric, and these specific varieties haunt battlefields to drink the blood of dying soldiers. So, yeah, wer hyenas, nobody likes them, which is terrible because, quite honestly, I think the hyena is one of the most amazing and fantastic animals in the animal kingdom. And they are, in fact, more related to cats than dogs, interestingly enough. Incredibly powerful animal and much nicer, actually, to their own families than lions, who are a bunch of absolute chads in every way. Lions are horrible creatures, but of course, they look so much better, which means that they get all of the lion's share. There you go, the lion's share of um, goodwill, whereas the far less pretty hyenas are much reviled. It's actually untrue to say that hyenas are scavengers any more than lions are. Lions scavenge more so, in fact. Hyenas are excellent hunters. Um, and for all you ladies out there they not only have a much better family structure, they're run by the ladies, which shows that they are, in fact, the better option in the animal kingdom, whereas lions, of course, as we well know, don't bother even sticking around for the birth. Um, the male lion is truly an awful creature. But you do get were lions, and in fact, in Kenya, there are some amazing stories of were lions, and I do believe that there was the case, which is a genuine case, when they were building the railways through Africa. There were several attacks from a very, very large black maned lion, and all the locals agreed that it was in fact a were lion because they could never find and catch it. Um, I'm not sure if at the end of that tale they finally did catch the lion, or at least a lion. Um, but black maned lions are apparently bigger and stronger and nastier than ordinary maned lions. And it certainly wreaked a lot of havoc along the railways. Um, and I believe it inspired the movie The Ghost in the Darkness, which was an amazing story of building the railways through Africa. So, certainly well worth checking out. Um, quite a lot of those. I think that were hyenas only come up in modern history um, as villains. Yeah, no, I agree, Leon. It was an amazing movie, phenomenal stuff. Um, we know that the ones that appear in comics, such as the DC Firestorm, were absolutely villains. Um, in the one episode of Monsters, there was a were hyena that was considered at least not wanted. The Heart's Cry had a were hyena in, again, not particularly liked. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they were considered bad. I do apologize, this cough is not going. The urban fantasy series with Ilona Andrews um, actually does have good were hyenas, but then Ilona Andrews does write some amazing books and is well worth the read. She does great, great fantasy stories with all sorts in, and she's very pro the supernatural creatures and cryptids. So great fun, great fun. My favorite is the Kate Daniels series. Um, there are video games that feature were hyenas, usually as boss fights. And of course, the 2011 film Hyenas had were hyenas, which were also bad. So, by and large, they're villains, no matter what, which um, I'm a bit sad for. I think they deserve much better treatment than that. Um, looking at the other varieties of were creatures in the Polynesian islands, you have were sharks. Now, again, this is an interesting one because they're not really considered to be good or bad per se, but they are certainly considered to be very dangerous. But then sharks are and would be. They are, as some would say, the wolves of the sea. Hey, Gabs. Um, so certainly they fit the role that the werewolf does fit. They're considered to be masters of the ocean, and some stories possibly even have certain powers over the ocean, which makes them specialized sailors, which obviously would be very, very big with an ocean going uh, culture like you find in the Polynesian islands. So, absolutely, they sometimes are portrayed in a good light and sometimes in a bad light. And if you ever meet a tall and well defined Polynesian fellow whose teeth are a little sharper than they ought to be, that's a sign that they might well be a weir shark. Um, they're often, interestingly, considered to be quite good looking, um, whereas in many cultures, any shapeshifter is considered to be ugly. The Asians often consider shapeshifters, particularly the kitsune, who are usually female, to be very, very beautiful. So hard to say. Um, of course, the legends of the kitsune are very, very, very lengthy and have all kinds of stories connected to them. One of their favorite is to trick travelers off the path that they are on. Hey, Johan, and lead them to what is apparently a safe haven in a stormy or foggy night, uh, only for them to find that they have been trapped by the kitsune for some reason and sometimes even killed. That they're not actually in any warm house, and so they're freed to death in the hillside, not realizing that they're not in a safe space. Um, it's an interesting situation, I think. Uh, we will have among the um, Eskimo clans even wear bears. Wear bears are also found apparently in um, I'm just being messaged with questions and things. Yes, so you do in fact have we're bears, we're wolves, we're foxes, and as I say that, hey, silver fox, um, there are even we're reptiles of varying varieties, though generally they're mammals. You do get we're sharks, we're turtles, we're tortoises. There is quite a long list, and it seems that even to the degree that you have certain varieties of European cat that could be weirs of varying varieties. You get weir rats um, to go along with that. So, yeah, there's a lot. I don't know. Give me a choice. There are so many. Which weir would you like to know more about? And I will find out all that I can and tell you what I can. As I have said, the Buddha, the weir hyena, is my absolute favorite. But there are so many others out there that have appeared in so many cultures. Uh, Emperor's son, can you ask a question? Absolutely, you can ask a question. Go ahead. What is your question, sir? Um, I'm partial to the weirder ones, I must admit. I can't help but feel that the werewolves are quite well known from modern mythology and so forth. But definitely some of the stranger ones that come up are great to to learn about and find out more about, and whether or not they, I don't know, what's your opinion on that? Are they good? Are they bad? Would you consider a werewolf to be negative or a danger, or would you say that they are all right? Um, hey Rob, thanks for joining us. Um, I don't know. It's a hard question. I suppose that anything that has a animal nature is going to have certain animal traits, and those things might be dangerous to people, but it doesn't necessarily make them um, evil. Just like in many cultures, zombies um, are not really evil. They're certainly dangerous, and you wouldn't want them around, but they're not evil per se. Okay, now there's a brilliant question. So, thank you very much to the Emperor's son. Is a werewolf a human that turns into an animal, or is it possible that you can have um, the other way round, where it's an animal that occasionally turns into a human? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. There are several versions that normally are animals and on occasion do turn human, but not always. And in fact, there have been a number of them in several modern stories. I believe in one of the Dresden Files, there is a woman that initially the main character, Harry Dresden, believes is a werewolf, but at the end of it, it turns out she is most not a werewolf. She is a wolf weir, which is the other way around. She is a wolf with the ability to become human on occasion. Um, would that make a difference? I'm not sure. I know that of the stories I've encountered, it's almost always with the wolves that can work the other way around. Um, did encounter one that was a boar and one that was a snake in stories. I'd have to go back and try and find. Um, and of course, Rob is being, as we ought to know, a complete and utter Richard. He wants to know if he's a weir vibrator because he's epileptic. Probably, yeah, or at least certainly something in that general um, body function. But yes, wolf weirs and werewolves both exist, and I think very important. And Rob, you have never been serious in your life, so I doubt it's a serious question, but it's an interesting point, and it might connect actually to some of the legends of Therianthropes, in that, yes, he does have a very good point. Epilepsy is absolutely affected by the phases of the moon, and as you approach full moon, it does get worse. So, is that something that people would see as an indication of um, therianthropy or not? Um, we also know that it is very much said that at the full moon, people get a little bit crazy, absolutely. And we also know that in many of the Therianthrope legends, it's only at the full moon that the change can occur. Um, whenever I have encountered um, a therianthrope story where it's an animal that can become a human, they generally only live in very rural areas. They are not part of normal society because they are normally animals and live as animals. Whereas your normal direction of you being a human for the most part and turning to a wolf, they live in societies as you would expect. The weir shark seems to be one of those rare ones that they can go both ways. They can be a shark that can become human. They can be a human that can become a shark. And it depends on their preference whether they live in one side or another. Certainly, I would agree with that comment there, Emperor Sun, that I think rabies definitely had an effect on many of the stories. Absolutely. Epilepsy could well have done as well. Just as things like the Black Death and tuberculosis had effect on vampire stories, very much so in the way it came out. So I think that there is absolutely a medical side to many of the cases. Um, it is hard to say. I mean, in the case of Peter Stubbs, he claimed to be a werewolf. He was deemed by the court, because he was tried in a court, uh, to be sound of mind, to be sane. He was not sick in the general sense. Maybe he was a bit crazed, but and he was absolutely a murderer and absolutely did eat some of his victims. So he was off his rocker, if nothing else. But maybe he was a werewolf and was just angry with people. I don't know. It's a fair question. Rob is right. Rob is absolutely right that moon phases have a big deal, which brings us to the other thing that has a big deal. So, Rob, would you say that you have any particular sensitivity to silver at all? Would you say that you're affected by silver? Apparently, because silver is the metal of the moon, you can affect uh, any shapeshifter negatively with something silvered. Emperor's Son, I love silver. Yeah, maybe that means that you're all right. You're not a therianthrope, so no shapeshifting on your side. Um, and Rob says he can only wear silver jewelry. So perhaps, um, perhaps you guys are both. You've got something in common there, that it's only silver that's good for you. So maybe you've answered yourself, Rob. You're not a therianthrope. Funnily enough, I have problems with silver. So what does that tell you? Um, I have serious difficulty if anything silver scratches me. I can get really, really sick. And I remember there was a little bit of I don't know, a sharp edge on a silver fork that I ate with once, and I cut the inside of my mouth, and I was down for like 3 days. So I can wear a silver ring or a silver necklace. There I'm fine. Um, but if it scratches me, so I don't know. What does that tell you? Am I a therianthrope? And if so, what kind would it be? Um, Hard to say. Things I was born in Africa. Maybe I am uh, a weir hyena. It's interesting that Emperor's Son is also epileptic, just like you, Rob. So yeah, a therianthrope is the generic term for any shapeshifter. Therian from the Greek meaning animal. So instead of a lycanthrope, which refers specifically to a wolf, lycos meaning wolf, um, therios means animal. So a therianthrope is basically a blanket term for any kind of animal shifter, whereas a lycanthrope is specifically the term for a wolf shifter. I imagine you could probably argue that there are um, similar terms that belong to specific other groups. I don't know. But yes, therianthropy, and of course, in the modern idea of having an animal spirit within you. That's why those people are called Therians, literally from the Greek for animal. They are considered to have an animal spirit, or they say they have. Um, Other people call them furries, so I don't know. Does it count? Okay, there's a thing. I know that many people who are furries are Therians, and many Therians are um, furries. But are that are they always that way? I mean, are there Therians who are not furries? I don't know. We'd have to look it up. Um, Rob, I genuinely believe that an epileptic seizure is some kind of spiritual event. You know, that's a common theme in a lot of cultures, and many cultures believe that if you are epileptic, um, you are a prophet of some variety. So perhaps perhaps that is the case. Maybe you and the Emperor's son are a kind of um, prophet. Are furries culturally appropriating lycanthropes? I suppose it just, you know, I don't believe, honestly, that uh, you can culturally appropriate anything. I think that is the biggest load of woke shit known to man. I'm sorry for saying that, because the entire ability for humanity to advance has to do with sharing culture. It's not appropriating, it's sharing. And if you really want to go that far, um, modern medicine comes from the West. So if you're not from the West, don't ever have a hospital. Um, Cars were invented uh, in Europe. So if you're not from Europe, you can't have a car. Cell phones come from Asia. So if you're not Asian, you're not allowed a cell phone. And we can go on like that, and that it becomes ridiculous. I think that absolutely sharing of culture is one of the greatest strengths of human uh, progress and ability. So, no, there is no cultural appropriation. Um, and yes, I agree with you, the Emperor's son. There's definitely something special about epilepsy. Not always nice, but not always bad either. It certainly gives you a link to something more, I think. And that's true of many people that have a permanent illness of some kind. You gain a sort of spiritual step up. So it's sort of a balance between. Hey, Letty Matty, welcome, welcome. Um, Now, again, Rob, are all werewolves evil, and are there any stories of any of the thropes helping a society? Actually, yes, there are. Um, there are cases where they're not evil. They just mostly are. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they embody creatures that people are very much afraid of, to be honest. I think that's the downside of any of the therianthropes. There are stories where um, it turned out after the fact that the victims of the evil therianthrope, whatever they were in fact evil themselves, and whatever the therianthrope was had removed from society something awful. I believe one of the stories, I'm going to have to dig to find it. I read it many years ago. It was a werewolf that suddenly went on a spree and killed a number of people, and the cops were confused as to why these people would have been targeted as at all anyway, because they apparently had nothing in connection with each other. But it turned out they were in fact murderers in this one story, and they were connected through that. And whatever the weir creature was, they said a werewolf, um, it took out the murderers. So maybe, yeah, maybe there are actually good good versions out there as well. Selkies are not necessarily helping society, but they're certainly good. The We're Swans are absolutely good, and mostly they stick to themselves and avoid trouble. But yes, uh, you ask me about culture. Go ahead. Ask, ask, ask. And I shall have coffee while you give me your question. Where swans are scary, do they belong to the king? No. Where swans are a European uh, version, and they turn up sometimes in England, sometimes in France, mostly. I think maybe Germany as well, and possibly Russia. They do not belong to anyone. And there have been attempts, at least in story, where people tried to steal their cloak of feathers so they could control the incredibly beautiful Weir Swan and marry them. But usually it ends badly, and either the Weir Swan dies or they manage to get their feathered cloak back and escape, and then they disappear and are never found again because people prove to be suitably holish. So they are good, and no, they do not belong to anyone, and they are very shy, at least in story. Okay, so Empress Sun, I am a Muslim. Um, he follows culture, but not religion. Okay. Um, what is your question there, Mr. Emperor's son? Tell us what your question. I will do my best to answer. Jokes aside, an army of Thropes sounds some would be empire building. Well, maybe. However, generally, it's only ever loners or small groups. They're apparently not as common as you might think. So, getting an army together is something I think would be unlikely or difficult in that regard. Certainly, it would be quite devastating if you wanted to conquer an area um, in the sort of underworld movie style. I think it would definitely give you a certain amount of damp trousers if you saw that coming. Um, if you wanted an empire, well, maybe it's a good thing that they only seem to be in very small numbers, because otherwise maybe they would take over and make an empire. 'Cause I'm pretty sure I would not end up on top of that empire. I'm going to tell you that for absolute certainty. But yeah, Emperor's son, give us your question. You follow culture. Culture is massively important to me. I think it's one of our greatest things to both gain and to share. And by doing so, it's how we improve the human experience. Um, it Okay, I'm going to fight with you on that one, the Emperor's Son, and here's why. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant question. He asks there, is religion real? Because religion doesn't allow us to think about these things. Now, key point, doesn't allow you to think about them. Um, but certain religions over certain times of history has absolutely believed in these strange things and even taken steps to act against them. I mean, we know from some of our last discussions, um, there were the vampire crazes where the church totally got stuck in and insisted on um, steps to be taken in burials and so forth to stop anyone rising as a vampire. So when it comes to the weird and cryptid, um, yeah, it's a bit of a dichotomy. Religion doesn't want you talking about it, but they absolutely do step in to deal with it at time. So right off bat, yes, culture does allow very much for you to believe what you like, whereas religion doesn't. But the churches themselves certainly do appear to believe in them. And I suppose, in response to what Rob's saying, that the problem with religion is extremism. No, I think the problem is very much, at least in my experience, as somebody who was um, a religious person at one stage, uh, they don't like to have to explain a lot of things. So they'd rather you didn't think about it. But it doesn't mean that the things don't exist. Um, I've never been in a church where they've discussed the importance of, and I assume they are important, demons and how to keep them away by proper piety and so forth. But at the same time, I worked alongside for a number of years the official exorcist for Natal. So very clearly the church believes in them, they just don't want to talk about it. And that's true also of vampires and werewolves. So, and as Rob says, religion is an attempt to explain strangeness, but I think in many ways it also isn't. It doesn't explain. And that's part of the problem because, if anything, it should. It should give us the answers that we need to handle those kind of things. Um, but it doesn't. It doesn't give us answers. And that's probably one of my biggest problems with formal religion. Spirituality and religion are not the same. As somebody put it to me the one day, spirituality is God's speech to us, and religion is our reply. And it's very often a failure. Um, no, it would not, Rob. Rob's asking, would the snake in Eden be an example of therianthropism? No, because bear in mind that wasn't a snake, it was a demon appearing as a snake. So in that case, no. Um, Interesting point there from Emperor's Son that religion says epilepsy is a sickness, but culture says it's spiritual. That would depend actually, because in uh, certain religions, including Native American religions especially, and the ancient Greek religions, epilepsy was considered a blessing. The oracle at Delphi was almost certainly epileptic. So right there. Um, Rob said it's a duality of nature and not just an appearance. Well, I don't know. What are demons? Are they a physical thing that can change their shape? Or are they a spiritual thing that appears as they want? Um, Bit of a difficult one. Uh, it would go back, I suppose, to the nature of demons and what they actually are. Most understandings is that they are entirely spiritual, but then that they will use something physical by possessing it to then achieve their end, which means that it's quite possible the snake was just a snake and a demon possessed it in order to approach Eve. Hard to say. Um, we only have three major religions today. No, that's not true. I'm afraid we have five, and rapidly are going back to um, more of the older ones. The three major religions are the Abrahamic, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But then you also have Buddhism and Hinduism, which are equally huge. So I would say five major religions. Um, but there's a huge move to some of the pagan religions as well. So Rob wants to know, do lycanthropes choose when and how to shift? Um, mm, it depends on the stories. Now, if you want to do a really deep dive, okay, here we go. You can become a weir in different ways. If you are born a weir, you can choose when and how you shift as you like because it is natural to you. However, these are very rare. You also get werewolves that are cursed by somebody else to be werewolves. These ones usually have the least control over when and how to shift, and very often are the ones linked to the moon. Then you get those that shift via sorcery, either through a belt of some kind of wolfskin or a cloak of some kind, who are able to shift when they have their item and use it. Um, and if you take the item away, then they are not able to use it and therefore cannot shift. So it does depend on the different varieties of um, shifter per se. So if you are a cursed shifter, it's out of your hands. If you are a magical shifter, it's when you've got your stuff. And if you are a born shifter, it's as and when you wish. So it does depend. I see we're being left by the Emperor's son. It's always interesting to have you on as well. Go and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. I will try and be back tomorrow, but have a great day and look after yourself. Um, Thank you for joining me and for being a part of the chat and all your questions. Um, Thank you very, very much. And I think after, goodness, an hour and 15 minutes, we should wrap up for today. So we will come back with more shifters in the next one. Remember to send me a message and let me know which kind of shifter you want looked into. We'll answer Rob's last question in just a brief second, but remember, everyone, like, subscribe, join the channel, and be a part of this fun and interesting discussion. And on our last note, do most shifters see this as a blessing or a curse per law? Quite literally, it is dependent on the three varieties. Those that want to change are definitely of the born or magical variety, whereas those that do not wish to and consider it a curse are the cursed ones, and that's across the board. So, as per law, one type is against it and the other two like it. And with that, we are going to wrap up. Thank you to everybody. Have the most amazing day, and we will catch you in the next one.